Hello, this is Matt Petrusek, Senior Director of the Word on Fire Institute, and welcome back to 10 Questions. Today in studio, we're blessed to have with us Brenden Thompson. Brenden is our Program Director of the Word on Fire Institute UK, and he has joined us stateside in our Rochester studio to do 10 questions. So here's the rules. I'm going to ask you 10 direct questions to elicit as much information as possible from you in a short amount of time. Now, you can answer yes or no, only yes or no. Now, to be fair, you can say yes in this respect and no in this respect, but it has to be yes or no, and at all costs, we have to avoid ambiguity. All right? Also, I want to just recognize the special advantage that you have, which with your lavishly dulcet English accent, we're going to believe whatever you say. So, especially your American
means I'm allowed
audience.
to say maybe then.
Yeah, that's right. You could break the rules. These are only suggestions for you. So you can use that or not. It just is on the table for your American audience. All right. Are you ready to play 10 questions?
Yes.
All right. Question number 1. Is Britain completely post-Christian? Yes or no?
No.
No.
So, the title post-Christian, I think I use it. Lots of people use it as common currency. But I think for some, my problem with the phrase post-Christian is that in some sense it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's almost like you tell yourself post-Christian and it kind of becomes a fact. So I kind of want to avoid it for that reason. But also I'm interested by the thesis of people represented by like the agnostic historian Tom Holland, who in his book Dominion, The Making of the Western Mind, speaks about how in the West, and I see this as true in England as well, that we are still enchanted by fundamentally Christian ideas. Now, certainly that they are severed from their Christian roots, but it's almost like it's a form of Christianity, kind of mutated Christian values speaking to. So in a sense, I almost feel like maybe we're definitely not in Christendom anymore, you know, a matrix of values, attitudes, behaviors that are informed principally by Christianity. So maybe we're in the afterglow of Christendom. So I would say no, but we're not in post-Christianity quite yet.
Is there a distinctive trend, though? Are we heading into that territory?
Yeah, so maybe it's my naivety or my optimism that wants to say we're not quite there yet. But yeah, certainly the trajectory is towards that direction.
And what would be sort of from at a definitional level, sort of peak post-Christian culture?
I guess when there is a wholesale rejection of some of the most fundamental features or values of Christian society. So, you know, in the Roman Empire, they weren't obsessed with human rights. In Greece, they weren't looking after the poor and the marginalized. So when there's a wholesale rejection of some of those things that we hold dear in the West, those values, then I think we'll be completely post-Christian.
The category of the values.
Yeah.
All right. So is Britain post-Christian? The answer is no.
Or not yet.
Not yet. Those parentheticals. All right. Question number 2. This is an issue here in the U.S. as well. Should we close more Catholic schools? We're recognizing the decline across the board in many areas. Should we just bite the bullet and close more Catholic schools? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. It's a
surprising
answer in much of our audience.
Yeah, so we should be willing to. So it's not, I'm glad that the question isn't should we close all Catholic schools, as if to say there isn't a distinction between good Catholic schools or Catholic schools that retain some of the mission. But, you know, and I know head teachers and perhaps bishops or, you know, kind of senior diocesan curia will probably hate me for this or say, you know, well, that's, you know, it's all well and good for Brenden, who doesn't have to lead a school to say this. But, you know, I've been spoken at head teachers' conferences, particularly in the UK. And the UK England in particular is unique in terms of the Catholic education system. So in the 19th century, when we were allowed to build Catholic schools, many of them were voluntary aided. So that means that the government pays for them. So the majority of Catholic schools in the UK are actually free. They're free. They're paid by the government, but the church owns the land. And often in the 19th century, they were being built before the parishes. Mm-hmm. So there was this sense of the missional character of Catholic schools. So I only answer yes in the measure that we have to have a detachment and to say we have to be willing at least to entertain the thought that we'd be willing to close these Catholic schools if they're not serving a mission. Like, what's the red line? Because they are a huge opportunity. If we didn't have Catholic schools, we would probably have to create them, because they're a huge way in which they help us, particularly I'm thinking here in England, to reach those who are far away, those who are lapsed Catholics, those who are non-Catholics who are attracted by education, by the robust Catholic education or education that's offered. Whether the Catholic education within it is robust is a different question. So I would say, I'm saying yes in the measure that we have to be willing to say, if it's no longer serving a missional purpose, or we try and see that and work towards that opportunity. So I'm not giving metrics here, but I would say for those who are in leadership in diocese, if you're a bishop or a head teacher, it's almost to be willing to say, yeah, if this isn't fundamentally a Catholic work we're doing, we have to have a detachment enough to say the Holy Spirit might be inviting us to close a school.
Bishop Barron has also been very clear on this point as well, he said on several instances that the moment that a Catholic school seeks to not put evangelization at the very core of its identity, so not relegated, let's say, to religion class, but at the very core of its identity, it ceases to have a reason to exist. And you're agreeing with that principle?
Yeah, agreeing with that principle. So I think of some of the ideas in Newman's idea of a university about how, the religious education department, so we call it the RE department, should be informing and often they are centres, so they're protected in the UK at least, protected roles. So the head teacher has to be a practicing Catholic, as does the head of the religious education department, and you have someone who looks after the Catholic life of a school. And that should inform not only just religious education, but all of the departments. So where a school is trying to do that, there should be a sense of the schools being open or having a Catholic identity supported by the diocese isn't inevitable. And I think that that's not a fatalism, but it's a challenge to rise and see again the opportunity, the evangelistic potency of potentially of schools.
All right, so should we close more Catholic schools? Yes, with conditions. Now, this is a related question, but one that's even more emotionally fraught. Should we close more parishes? Yes or no?
Gosh. I'm going to sound terrible, but I'll say yes again for similar reasons.
Pragmatist.
Gosh, bishops listening to this must think I'm awful.
We'll conceal your identity, don't worry.
So yes, but I would say within the limits of canon law. So canonically, and I think this is really good. This is why canon law acts as a kind of as a protective or a barrier at its best. So canon law says that you can't just close a parish just because it's not got many people in it or it's not making enough money. Those are not good enough reasons in canon law. So canon law tells us that you can restructure or close parishes in the measure that it serves the mission of the church in that area, or it serves the faithful in that area better. It serves the mission of the church. So I would say we have to be able to say yes, closing parishes. So I don't want to advocate just kind of closing down like willy-nilly or without much thought, or say, if we remove 50% of parishes in this very, kind of, in a sense, structured decline. But we have to be able to say, yes, close more. Like, how does it help us to serve the mission of the church in a local place? So for some, that will mean that they'll have to travel a lot further to go, or we won't be able to think as parochially as numbers decline in the same way that we are. It's a beautiful sign of the church's mission that the parish is a sign of God's presence in a particular community.
Right.
So I like that it's actually very difficult, that the church makes it difficult to close a parish. So I think that mitigation exists to make us over-eager to close parishes, but we need to be, for the same reason as we should be willing for schools to close, how do we serve the church's mission better through our parish system?
So should we close more parishes? Yes, but again with conditions. And it's important to note before we move to the next question that there are alternatives to closing parishes and closing schools, and that's the regeneration of the faith, the renewal of the faith, and more work on vocations. So we need not see ourselves as destined for decline. All right, question number 4. Should people leave their parish if they don't like their priest, or their parish doesn't give them what they would say, doesn't give them life or make them feel alive? Yes or no?
No.
Oh.
So this is, and many people listening will have experienced this. You go to a parish and the priest, the homilies could be boring, the liturgy could leave much to be desired. But in a sense, it's the challenge one has as a faithful. How do you make what's familiar or what's dull or bland? God still speaks through the liturgy, even if it's less than ideal. So it's that challenge. And I remember particularly, say, my mother struggling for years. The priest was standing athwart of lots of her efforts, and some of them, probably maybe naive or a bit misguided, but there was, genuine passion and desire and energy. And I remember as a younger Catholic looking at my mum and said, let's just leave, just go. It's clearly it's not helping you at all. But I think as I've got older, I admired my mother's determination to serve in spite of that there was a kind of perseverance and a sense of place, that it's not just kind of church hopping. If I don't like this one, I move to this one. The temptation, I guess, in that regard is to fall into a kind of consumer Catholicism. I don't like the flavour here, so I'll just move to where I get what I want, in a sense. So I would, in a sense, I'd want to challenge myself. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't ever moved parishes. I think there's sometimes red lines, where they say like, actual liturgical abuses going on, or there's actual harm been caused, let's say, through the negligence or the maliciousness of the priest or staff in a parish. But I should say the tendency within us should be to stick with it.
So some parents may be listening to your answer and be sympathetic with it on principle. But let's imagine a scenario in which, say, teen children are really not responding well to going to Mass. They're still going because they have to, but you can sense that they'll leave the moment they're permitted to. Mm-hmm. And the parents are aware that there is the best homilist for youth in the world, just one parish down. Are there circumstances in which it would be a prudent judgment, it would be justified to switch parishes?
Yeah, I suppose there could be. But I would say for those who are trying to engage teens, when I came to faith, I went through a big experience called World Youth Day in Sydney. So many people know of World Youth Day. And the criticism that some people have of those big events is like, it's not fair because you give them this mountaintop experience and then you send them back to their parishes and the parishes can't compare. And I've never thought of it like that, because had I not had that experience, I grew up in a parish but was ready to lapse from the faith. And World Youth Day, after World Youth Day, I went back to my parish. The parish was the same, but I was different. I was able to see and appreciate things. So it's not that my parish was now very, very exciting or matched that World Youth Day, but that sense of conversion meant that I could see and experience things differently. So I would be counselling parents to say, there's that wonderful research by Christian Smith about, the transmission of faith over generations, and says, where can we put our young people into situations where they have chances for organic conversation about faith, not only at home, but with their peers. So I'd be wanting to say, we stick with our parish, and that's a good principle for our young people to see, but we also get involved and find, engaging youth ministry or apostolates or ministries or ways to serve for our young people. And that's a way to kind of complement and help them to see the parish, because the likelihood is that when they get older, they're going to still have to learn how to deal with a parish that might not live up to their expectations.
All right, fair and comprehensive. Okay, so next question. Given that lay vocation is primarily in the home and in the world, or by definition, so given that, let's put it this way, do lay Catholics have a duty to actively participate in parish life, including being involved in the committees and the charity events and things like that? Is there a duty there, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I've heard this before. There was a priest friend recently who said he'd asked somebody who would have been very competent and capable to help it in some regard in the parish, said, would you help? And he said, no, because I don't see my parish that way. I do, the parish is there to give me sacraments and help to, fuel my mission for the world, let's say, to give me the grace, to strengthen in the spirit, to go out in the world. So I would say that's fair. Like, I think that's good, and that's a prudential judgment, and also one knows that in seasons of life. So, for example, I've got lots of very young children, 3 under 5, but I still serve in the parish, and I also do ministry or apostolate work as part of my day job. But I almost think it's a duty to serve my local parish. There's that sense of, if you want to see the church come alive locally, you need to need to contribute. There needs to be, in a sense, skin in the game. So, in a sense, it's noticing in yourself whether there is that sense of I'm just happy to kind of to receive, but also it's that sense of giving back. Now, some of that comes through kind of tithing and regular giving, but it isn't a substitute for, in a sense, contributing into the life of the parish. Because I see in many parishes it can be a great sadness where, for example, you have a parishioner who's been there for 10, 20, 30 years, and nobody's ever said hello, nobody's ever spoken to them. You could be completely anonymous. Maybe they should be putting themselves forward, but we should have a mentality. So it's, in that sense, the duty arises from the fact that I should see this not just as something I'm just a guest of the parish, but this is a place in which I can serve the mission of the church. The mission of the church locally often happens within the context of a parish. So I think there is a sense of a moral obligation to serve appropriately, with the caveats I've given, within the life of the parish.
To actively participate. All right, thank you. Next question. This one has become controversial within some circles in the church recently. Should Catholics try to convert other people? Yes or no?
Yes. Lots of my adult Christian life has centered around questions of communication. How in the limited, constructs of language that we've got in every age, be able to speak about the gospel, to help people to see what I see, to make what matters to me matter to somebody else. And what I've often found is that there are concepts and words that we use. So I could use the word evangelization, and for one person it means one thing, and someone else has a wildly different concept. And we very often don't deepen our sense of definitions. So what do you see when you see this word? And that can help maybe to clear up misunderstanding. And I see this misunderstanding when it comes to the word conversion. Mm-hmm. So for some people, it has this kind of air of proselytism, of forcing. It has this kind of negative sense towards it. And I don't see it like that. I think it can be done in that way, and that we should obviously avoid something that's coercive, something that's manipulative. But Christ, we read in the end of the Gospel of Matthew this call for the Great Commission to make disciple makers, to go, to baptize. And so part of that is a conversion, and I would say conversion in the sense of a transformation. So we're inviting people into a transformation of life. So in the measure that that's what we mean by conversion, then absolutely yes, it's commanded.
And to those who say that conversion and proselytizing are synonyms, or at least, or maybe even mean the same thing, you say?
I can't see that in the tradition of the church, the saints, as they've spoken of conversion, speak of it in that way. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm glad that there is a distinction. There's a word like proselytism, which is not conversion, and it's very different. And so I would say maybe there's a sense of reclaiming or recovering the word conversion, and where people have this for whatever reason, this happens to words over time, don't they? But it's the decline of a word and its meaning, or it's a negative inference on a word, is not inevitable. So maybe there's a work for us to kind of reframe the word conversion.
Trying to reclaim it. All right. Question number 7. To evangelize those who are far away from the church. So we could say lapsed Catholics, we could say those in other denominations, we could even say those atheists. So thinking of those who are not near conversion or not already interested in the church. That's the audience. We should avoid controversial topics categorically. Yes or no?
No.
No.
No, don't avoid controversy. It's really tempting. I can often be a scaredy cat when as a Catholic. I kind of avoid. I remember going to a hairdresser's, and someone, I was a theology student at the time, and the hairdresser asked, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I study theology." And she said, "Oh, is that like the study of rocks and stuff?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And it elicited the same amount of conversation. It was that kind of avoidance. And that's not even particularly controversial. It almost just feels like somehow it's that sense of living within the sea of privatization of faith and values and convictions. And faith, if it's privatized, just becomes dead. And what I find about controversy, actually, is that people are not going to ask you, why do you think Jesus is so great? They're not. Maybe they do occasionally, but very often they will ask the questions that are on their mind, why does the church believe this? Or I have a difficulty about this, or I have doubts. So I would like to see controversy as an opportunity to share the church's story. So I think it's often in those controversial moments. Now, we need to prepare as evangelists and apologists, those who want to share the church's story, for those moments. But I think actually it's precisely controversy that offers us an opportunity or window to speak about the church.
So one way, and I think this is the way you're categorizing it now, is to say when controversy finds us, we should enter into it. Is it ever prudent or effective to engage others, sort of engaging on a question that is controversial by nature? So starting off, not necessarily polemical, but with an edge to it. So asking, for example, something about a value in society, let's say a pro-life value, or say the question of the necessity for the belief of God to have any values at all, something with a bit of an edge. Is that ever appropriate in the evangelical endeavor?
As in, do you mean that a conversation's already happening, or we provoke a conversation?
No, you're provoking a conversation with something that could be interpreted at least as controversial. Is that ever prudent?
Yeah, I think so, because I think it can be done more or less successfully, more or less tactfully, more or less. So, yeah, that something is provocative doesn't mean it's necessarily belligerent, because it can be done in good faith and trying to provoke a question about something that's important. So, yeah, sometimes lots of my experience in the past years have been going onto different media platforms, let's say, to talk about, and often controversial things. And not all mediums are created equally. So some, I would avoid because it's like a bear pit, and there's no, in terms of provoking conversations, not possible. It's not going to give you the right hearing or the right understanding. But for others, if there is a genuine desire to kind of hear and forums that exist, we should, we can and should provoke.
Okay. Question number 8. So those have been challenging questions. So here's a softball. This one we can easily answer and move on to the next one. Is the church doing well enough dealing with the abuse crisis? Yes or no?
Nice light one. Yep. Okay. Is the church doing well enough to deal with the abuse crisis? I have to say, unfortunately, I think my answer for here is no. And I would say that no doesn't mean that nothing has been done. In many ways, it's night and day compared to, say, like the church of the 70s and the 60s, and say even evidence we have from previous centuries. But so the church has moved, and I think even reforms that were done under the pontificate of Benedict and under Francis, the church has moved, but so much more needs to be done. So it's not just the tragedy of the abuse itself, but compounded by the tragedy of the denial and the cover-up, and how much additional harm has been done through poor choice of language, poor engagement with survivors. And there have been really good bright spots and things that have happened. But for example, there has been this attitude sometimes that, well, we've done the work and we're reformed. And I would say, no, we're reforming, not reform. There's always ever need for. I've seen, and I can only speak for the church in England and Wales, but I still see an attitude in parishes where, like, oh, well, it's the job of the parish safeguarding officer. They're the safeguarding, or it's the diocesan person. But if you're in a diocese of 175 parishes, you can't possibly. That's an unsustainable workload to give to that person. So it's in a sense of, it's all of our jobs, and I would say that's the more to be done. So I see it with in my wife's school, whereas we all, a culture of safeguarding young people has to be everyone's job in a sense, because everyone can spot the signs. And if people don't spot the signs, they'll think, oh, no, it's not my place to say something. These are how things, the snakes can hide in the shadows. Right. So in a sense, there has to be this culture where we all take ownership for it. And that some of the laws that have been promulgated are kind of followed and used. So I think there's still a way to go in terms of, say, transparency and, zero, kind of no-nonsense approach. So I think there's still development to go. But things have been done. I'm heartbroken for victims, but hopeful because there are steps being taken.
Right, so progress, but still not enough.
Yeah.
Home stretch. Question number 9. Should evangelists be paid? Yes or no? Money.
Money, yeah.
Not in flour and bacon and being allowed to stay the night in someone's house.
I feel like if I say no, I'm out of a job.
Yeah, careful with this one.
Should evangelists be paid? So yes or no? Yes. We read in the scriptures that a labourer deserves their wage. So money is an interesting one. I remember going to a group of priests who had asked me to pitch like an event for young people in the deanery. And they said, oh, I love this idea. And I talked about a youth event and bringing different young people to confirmation and saying, you know, all this wonderful thing. And then they said, this is excellent. Yeah, let's do this. And I said, okay, well, it's going to cost some money. And they were like, oh, okay, well, you know, I think it's actually going to be really hard and problematic. I would challenge every parish priest, you know, to kind of look at their financial audit for the year and say how much of it is dedicated to mission or evangelization. Because money, what we spend our money on is like we might not think twice about spending money on a plumber or to get the roof done. But mission, that's always, you know, that can always just be, you know. So that's not me saying that there isn't a space for voluntary, you know. So it's not that everyone needs to be paid. And could people be paid too much and can that be a source of scandal? Of course. Mm-hmm. But I think, and not everyone is called, let's say, like myself, to serve within the institutional church or ministry and apostolate. Most people, of course, are working in the world and therefore they don't want to be paid. You know, they think I want to give it as free gift to the church and to volunteer. So it's not a rejection of that. It's not like absolutely everyone has to be paid for things. But I would say more so in the English case, we don't really honour or value people what they're worth. So, you know, we won't pay, you know, we kind of expect that somebody who has spent time having a theology degree has got this skill and has got this expertise. You know, money isn't the be-all and end-all, but it is a way of honouring that. It's not only honouring what they are doing for you there in that moment, but honouring the learning and the study and the sacrifice and the time and the, you know, kind of the reverence they're putting into being able to serve in this way. So I'm not saying everyone has to be paid all the time, but yeah, I think generally speaking, if somebody is sacrificing towards it, it's a good gesture. It's a gesture. The money can be a reverent sign of I really value this.
All right. Question number 10. Now, the previous questions, there's been some flexibilities in the answer, but this one, you better get this one right.
Okay.
Do you adore the royal family, the whole royal family?
Do I adore them?
Caveat, whole royal family. Yes or no?
No. So I'm probably terribly British. It was. So I'm glad the question was, are you a monarchist? I think I'm a monarchist. I don't want to abolish the monarchy, but I really don't care that much about the monarchy, to be honest. It's really funny because every time I come to America, everyone just asks, like, so, you know, they want Brenden Thompson, Word on Fire, royal correspondent. What do you have to say about the royal family? I was like, I don't know. I should have done some research.
Yes.
So I've really no idea what's going on with the royal family or that. So it seemed like nice enough people.
Live from Montecito. All right. Okay. You have completed 10 questions. Thanks so much, Brenden Thompson, for being with us. And thank you all for joining us once again for 10 questions. We will see you next time. God bless.